I think you can all probably see the title. If you don't, I'm just going to remind all of you guys, since you might not remember. Can crypto and blockchain reverse the tech decline and enable an internet renaissance?
All right.
I can't imagine who wrote that. This panel will explore the future of cryptocurrency blockchain technologies, consider their implication for global money, global security, and internet architecture. Okay, so to deal with these weighty topics, we've got, first up, well, Bill, you already know, our recovered academic, mathematician, philosopher, now doing more interesting things. Next up, Ed Moy, who he was director of the U.S. Mint, but I think it's fair to say that you are not a hard money guy necessarily in this future world, and you are now a board advisor and a board member for a number of crypto and Bitcoin and other related companies. So that's why you're here. And then last, George, needless to say, doesn't need, I'm sorry, Steve. Steve, okay. So Steve is doubly qualified for being here. First of all, he's been a media owner for the last 25 years or more. And doing that has had to be in the teeth of the internet. I don't know of any business, even fintech, has not had the swarms of digital hurricanes blowing through it like media has. So that's number one. And then second of all, Steve has spent a lot of time and thought on the question of money and what's the best way to do money going forward. So Steve's here for twice. And then last but not least, George. George, I should say Cypherpunk Gilder. I'm very sorry that John Perry Barlow is no longer with us, because he would treasure this moment of hearing George. He would have loved Life After Google, and I'm sorry he didn't get to read it, but he will maybe someday. Also, I was happy. I left my copy at home on the desk as I ran to the airport. So instead of not reading it, which would have been what I would normally have done, I realized, wow, I'm flying over Ohio at 37,000 feet. I'll just download it. So I did. So I, from the cloud, in the clouds, got my copy of Life After Google, which I will second Peter Thiel in my own small way and say it's an amazing book and you should buy it. And in fact, you can do that because there are copies right out there for only 20 bucks that you don't have to give to another Seattle company if you buy it here. So, with that all out of the way, George, essentially you're making a case that the internet is broken badly and getting worse by the minute. Can you just give us the prosecution case right now? What exactly is wrong with it? Don't worry about how we're going to fix it. Just what are all the, because lots of people think the internet is fabulous. Let me download your book.
Well, it's a broken paradigm. How do you tell a broken paradigm? When the more money you spend on it, the worse it gets. And here we have 1 billion breaches of private data last year on the This year, we're spending roughly 20 to 30% more on internet security, and we're on track for 3 billion breaches. It's clearly a broken system, and Nick Tredenik put it well as you know, to have IP addresses is like having public keys with no private keys. It's a failed foundation for a secure system. So in effect, so we have a broken paradigm on the internet, and we have a solution in these new cryptographic inventions that the blockchain epitomizes.
Financially, I mean, you say that it costs more and you get less results. Lots of people would say, hey, it's free. I get my free Google. I get my free this. No, because
it costs more for security. We spend more and more on
people
security programs and get less and less security. We have the problem that all the security patches, post-hack security as I call it, all these security patches are additive. They just, well, as the internet expands, it's governed by Moore's law. So the attack surface expands exponentially while the remedies increase additively. And so you have the essence of a broken paradigm. So and it has to be replaced. And we have the wonderful efflorescence around the world of cryptographic technology to address it.
This is why I said cyberpunk, by the way. I mean, the cryptographic, the first cover of Wired, I think, almost was Stephen Levy's Crypto Rebels in masks, John Gilmore and those and everybody.
You were with the initial Wired, weren't you?
Yeah.
You were.
I mean, cryptography's been around since 1990. PGP, I don't know, Phil Zimmerman, 1990 or something like that. What happened?
Well, it just hasn't been applied systematically to the internet. The internet started as a communication system. It's a giant replicator, runaway replicator, and it doesn't have any way to authenticate or prove the origins or the facticity or the time-stamped priority of its inputs. And so it is a broken system.
Steve, from a media, now with your media hat on, is it broken? Is the internet broken?
I don't know if it's broken, but I know it's been very disruptive. Our old paradigm, which goes back to the 1840s for print media with the invention of the steam press, which made possible mass circulation newspapers and magazines, that was destroyed with the advent of the internet, much of that. And one of the ways that we've tried to survive it, most others have just cut back, which is why newspapers look like doilies now that you find on an airline. And but what we tried to do was to remember what Peter Drucker, the late great management guru, once said. He said, every organization should always remind itself, what is your purpose? What is it you are trying to do? And if you do that, then you don't get quite as hung up when the means to achieve it radically change. But human nature being what it is, we tend to always want to do what we've always done, which is why the outliers often come in and upend an industry. And we did a couple of things at the very beginning when we started our electronic publishing in the mid-90s, as did everyone else. Most publishers just thought you took a printed page and put it online, and that was electronic publishing, which was like the old, when movies were invented by Edison and others 120 some odd years ago. Some people thought that a feature film was filming a stage play. No, very, very different medium. So one of the first things, two things we lucked into, one is we separated Forbes.com from Forbes magazine. Separate staff, separate building, separate support systems, so that way you wouldn't get what happens often with existing organizations is they bend whatever is there to their immediate purposes. It's human nature. So we wanted the baby away from the rollover of the mother. And the other thing we did was that we went beyond the content of Forbes magazine. So that we used a lot of outside content. We weren't just restricting it to what we published in print. And then one of the other things we did, and so they grew up, but trying to combine, and this gets to when people say, oh, when you're a legacy company, just pretend you're a startup and start over. Easier said than done. And one of the things, so in about 12 years ago, we decided the baby was now a strapling youth. Forbes.com was doing well. And we decided to combine the two, the print and the online. And it's amazing how difficult it is, even though they're both the communications journalism businesses, how difficult it is to combine two different cultures. Just take editorial. The print people thought that online journalists were peasants, just churning out junk each day just to fill the space. The online people thought the print journalists were lazy snobs who, if they did an article once every 2 weeks, thought they were geniuses and really sweating hard. And it was extraordinary how difficult it was for many good people to make the transition where you had to do both. A lot of people couldn't do it. Very, very painful. And one of the things about these kinds of transitions is there's no playbook. There's no formula, no painting by the numbers. When a disruptive technology comes along, what do? You don't know what to do. You are experimenting constantly, and you hope you get it right. So as the saying goes, you live in an age where you can eat well or sleep well, but not both. The eating part I have no problem with. The other part can be problematic. But one of the things we did, big things we did was several years ago decided that people can create content whatever their backgrounds. So we didn't think that journalists were the only sources of content creation. And boy, that caused a ruckus in the industry. So today we have over 3,000 contracted contributors for Forbes.com. We have about 110,000 pieces online each year. We do a virtual magazine each day. So we have the 600 or 800 published pieces in Forbes, but over 100,000 other pieces. And we get about, depending on who's doing the counting, 80 to 90 million unique visitors a month. On the sales side, you used to have a rate card. We still do one just for nostalgia's sake. But a lot of it's now programmatic selling, which is a whole new crazy world.
What do you mean by that?
It's done by computer. You have these services that do ads, and they place them on sites around the universe. And so you're not in fully control of that. And then the other advertising you get is you design a program for each client. It's not one size fits all. We do, in rock and roll now, one of the biggest source of revenues is now, who would have thought in the high-tech age, is concerts. Yeah, that's a big thing. We now find live events is a very major source of revenue. Licensing is a very big source of revenue. So we've been successmade. I think to pat ourselves on the back, because no one else will, especially if you're conservative, we've made the tradition of a legacy print operation better than just about anyone else, certainly in the magazine industry. And in terms of the internet, it may be broken, but by golly, it broke the traditional print legacy industry. And there were moments when we thought it might break us because, again, there's no blueprint on what you do when something brand new comes along and you have to try to reinvent yourself. Easy to say, but not easy to do.
Just to keep this going a little bit longer, George, is there a media application for Bitcoin? Is there, or for blockchain? I mean, you don't like advertising. You're not a big friend of that.
Well, I think that the aggregate and advertise model kind of collapses when you have a smartphone with 30% of the bandwidth costs are ads, and you have a click rate of 0.06%, half of which is in error. So the real click rate is 0.03%, which is really for Nigerian princes hustling your grandmother. Okay, it really is not a viable business in the end. And
so do you think that Forbes' model is in danger?
Well,
I'll answer that. It's always in danger.
Okay.
And what works today may not work tomorrow. And advertisers know that as well. People don't like those kinds of intrusions. So, as my father liked to say, if you think you've arrived, you're ready to be shown the door. And we're reminded that of every day.
Is there a
I'm
solution?
just comparing the big American internet companies, which get 80 to 95% of their revenues from advertising.
Right.
Ads that are really minuses.
You're talking about like Google.
With the Chinese competitors, they're real competitors who get 10 to 20% of their revenues from advertising. I think capitalism works when there are prices, and I think ultimately programs of various online micropayments that are being developed actually in China more than here now. That this is going to happen, and I think I'm sure Forbes will be as nimble as ever in exploiting this new opportunity as it arises.
Okay,
by the way, on your point, George, about 1 billion breaches and now maybe 3 billion, pick a number, I was with Jack Ma, who is one of the most extraordinary men in the world today. Yeah. He virtually created private companies in China through the use of Alibaba. Extraordinary what he's done. But he says that they get 300 million hacks each day, just on Alibaba, fending them off.
And Jack Ma had a great, debating Elon Musk, he had a great, Musk was talking about AI taking over everything and usurping human beings. And Ma just said, that's stupid. That's like having human beings race cars. I mean, they're just different vectors of capability. They're not competitive. But anyway, that's gratuitous. But
let me get Ed into
that means free.
Let me get Ed into this as a veteran of the United States government. You know as well as anybody how hard it is to change things, change anything. Do you see a path? I know you're now a blockchain enthusiast. Obviously, you must to some extent see a path for how we get from here to the here that we live in today and the there that he was just talking about on stage 20 minutes ago. There's a long, long ways between those. Is this going to end up being led by government? Is it going to be led by who's going to make this happen?
Well, first of all, I hope government doesn't lead it, because we're all going to be in trouble then.
They will try to lead it.
Yes, absolutely. So George has a great point here. When you look at fiat currency is in essence the government's monopoly on money. And maybe some of the experts in the audience can comment on it. I'm not familiar with that many monopolists who are willing to voluntarily give up their monopolist position. And so government has a vested interest in keeping the system the way it is. But the way I look at cryptocurrency and blockchain development, and the reason why I went from an old money guy to the future of where I think money can go, is that this is, in essence, a private sector alternative to government's monopoly. And so I don't ever see this as a complete substitution where governments give up their monopoly on fiat currency and let the private sector do whatever it wants. But I do think that the market itself will gravitate toward these solutions. You're already seeing it right now when, for example, Cyprus had their bail-in, right? 40% of people's savings disappeared in the bank because they needed to bail out the banks and Cyprus didn't have any money. So what happened? People got the message and they started looking at alternatives like cryptocurrency to get their money out of Cyprus into a safe haven. You're also seeing the same thing in Venezuela, where their fiat currency doesn't work. And so where are they gravitating to? They're gravitating toward cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, understanding that Bitcoin's volatility is still less than the inflation rate of Venezuela. And so here in the United States, we're fairly insensitive to that because fiat generally works, and as much as we don't like our financial system, at the end of the day, money gets transferred from A to B, but in a lot of areas around the world, it doesn't work so well.
Well, it does seem...
By the way, if you want to see the reaction of government, just take a look at the testimony today of Mark Zuckerberg at the House Financial Services Committee, and the way they grilled him over Libra. And a Republican congressman said, this is a threat to government currency. You'd think from California, but no.
There are no Republicans in California.
But yeah, this is where the Interior Department's letting us down on endangered species. But you can see the problems that Libra is going through. The traditional payment systems like MasterCard and others are going to resist it. That's why they pulled out, not just pressure from the U.S. government, but recognizing this could blow them away if Facebook knows what it's doing. And number two, you could see that government is going to do everything it can to make sure this, if anything like Libra comes up, they're going to have it firmly under their thumb. And that's why hope Zuckerberg just nods his head and figures out a way to go ahead, because he could do to money what Henry Ford did to automobiles if he gets this Libra right. And one of the dumb questions, just by the way, I can't resist, was he said he's going to tie Libra to a basket of currencies. One of the flaws of Bitcoin and others is just the volatility. If something's volatile, it is not money. Money's a measure, stable measure of value. And he's pointed out, this congressman said, well, you know, the dollar's the predominant currency today. But what if China continues to grow and the yuan becomes more important? Does that mean that the yuan's going to become more important in backing Libra? And isn't this a threat to the United States? I thought, oh my God, how do you begin to answer something like that? And yeah, it's very instructive, absolute fear. But just imagine, though, what would have happened if you had had congressional hearings whether Lyft or Uber should be allowed to exist. That's the kind of question you'd get.
Yeah. Don't ask permission, apologize.
Apologize and do it.
No, right. Okay, well, I mean, apologize. Do it and then apologize.
There's two things from a government point of view. There's two bad things about this Bitcoin stuff. One is they don't control it. Secondly, now this is what they will emphasize, as they just did last week, all kinds of evil people will use it for nefarious things. And I was amazed to see they busted 25 people in 5 countries on a vast sort of criminal conspiracy by tracing blockchain fund. Ed, you might know more about this than I do. I mean, it's not as untraceable as people say it is. It is not.
Yep. It's not. I mean, it's immutable, an immutable database that can be searched and.
But if it's encrypted, in theory.
It's not encrypted.
Ah. Okay. So in other words, it's kind of fake news that this stuff is untraceable.
Yeah. Well, they traced Silk Road. They've traced lots of things. It's more traceable than cash, and that's why it's better than cash, in my judgment. I don't think that the reason it's better than cash is it allows you to prove that you haven't been committing crimes.
Right.
I don't think technology invades privacy. I think when I was a kid, there was the phones were all party lines with a couple of operators who listened to all the calls. I was in a town with ruled by rumors, which were essentially unanswerable. Periodically, we burned a witch, I believe. And,
you're not that old, George. You're not that old.
It was, you know, that's
just feels
what blockchain does is give you a way to document that you were not committing crimes, that you were not issuing hit orders on Silk Road, that you were not violating. You can document what you actually did, and this is a great advance. With cash, you can't document, so that the prosecutor can contrive any.
Well, that's also why they've been getting rid of large denomination bills as the frontline thing against.
So Larry Summers,
a few bills get tracked, but in general, cash is not really traceable.
No.
Yeah. Yep. So Larry Summers, so if you wanted to get rid of cryptocurrency because it contributes to illegal activity, you're better off getting rid of the US dollar, because far more dollars are used for illegal activity than cryptocurrency.
And the other thing to keep in mind is people were doing bad things before blockchain. People were doing bad things, by the way, free markets before Adam Smith came along, just for the record.
So it was interesting. Larry Summers, about 3 years ago, said, maybe we ought to get rid of $100 bills because only criminals use $100 bills. Now, I got two responses to that. One is that is a rich white guy, academic, liberal saying that because he doesn't hang around Chinese immigrant parents who fled communist China and saw 3 collapses in their banking system, and he carries a wad of $100 bills in his pocket. So that's number one. And number two is, being the former Mint director, I can tell you that 80% of all the production of $100 bills goes to central banks, and some may argue that it really is a big criminal enterprise.
And by the way, the idea that if you get rid of the 500 euro note or the $100 bill or $50 bill, that's going to stop terrorism. Just imagine, is a terrorist going to say, gee, I have to carry bags of 20s and 10s instead of hundreds? Oh, it's so heavy, I'm going to get a job at McDonald's. This just doesn't work anymore. This is preposterous.
Well, so how do we get from, I mean, it's possible at least, Bitcoin has been, it's been around, what, 10 years? The US government has tolerated it. I think that's probably the right word. Yeah. They don't.
And that's because the number of transactions is so infinitesimally small, it doesn't make any difference to the US government at this point in time.
I mean, in some ways, you could make an argument that it's more of a problem for the banks than it is for the US government from a certain point of view. I mean, US government could happily get out of Hong Kong. They're not in the money business, and it works just fine. And so they don't need to be in the money business, whereas banks kind of do. I mean, are they in the crosshairs on this?
Yep, and the short answer is banks on one hand complain about unregulated cryptocurrencies and we want to stamp it out, but on the other hand they have skunkworks operations like JP Morgan Chase developing their own cryptocurrency to compete against the unregulated ones.
Well, then let's broaden it out to the blockchain, because I think, that is really, at the end of the day, cryptocurrencies are a subset of a much larger topic that I think George, is what gets you up. That's why you're making all these claims. It's not because of cryptocurrencies, it's because of the blockchain.
Well, it's a new security architecture for the internet and a new...
It's not a new one. It's just the first one they've ever had. It addresses
the 2 great hacking crises of the world economy. Central banks hacking money and spies and hackers hacking the internet. And these two are both addressed by this single invention that is being improved as we speak, and will ultimately produce a second generation of blockchains that actually will scale and meet these dual crises of hacking in the world economy.
Now, I'm going to take a wild guess that you don't think the incumbent companies are going to be the ones leading the charge on that.
I think all the experiments are positive. I think it's good that everybody is testing these systems in every way. And I think from this ferment will emerge blockchains that can actually function and solve these address these 2 crises. I don't want to say solve problems, pursue these 2 opportunities.
To the degree that these blockchains are successful, won't they involve improvements to anonymity and then perhaps potentially raise, this question about underground economies, bad actors using these currencies?
I think anonymity is a menace. That's the great problem with the internet. The internet essentially allows anonymity, and the problem with Bitcoin, as Giuseppe Gori's coming book explains, is that it allows anonymity essentially, and anonymity is a menace. It's not a good feature of any system, and its dominance in the current crypto culture has crippled it, right. And it has to be abandoned. We want specific immutable identities, and that is the systems that develop with public keys as addresses and private keys tied to specific people and participants and devices.
You don't worry that points you straight back to trusted third parties?
that everybody's trusted. Everybody
So, but the third parties
has
go
a
away.
specific identity. That's the basic condition of human life. We all have specific identities. The mistake both the internet and the crypto world has made is try to deny this fact of life and instead try to create spuriously anonymous systems that don't really work. And so this is...
What's to prevent me from making multiple Spencer Reesses?
That's bio...
So in other words, like my DNA would somehow be encoded.
They increasingly biometric ties to your devices identify you, and that's how a civilized society works. You are you.
So it wouldn't be enforced by the government
internet.
or something. It wouldn't be a government agency or something that would say, "Well, that's the real Spencer, and this is a fake one."
No, we don't. But as again, Giuseppe's book shows, you can actually have reputation systems that are associated with these identity systems that actually do function reliably and facilitate a civilized life.
Would you then go with prescribing anonymity? I mean, would you enforce that?
I think that the systems, if they're going to be monetary systems that are going to conduct transactions and are going to be the framework for global commerce, they're going to have secure identities.
But I mean, don't you have
private
the danger of centralization? You have China with its social credit system, tracking people. I mean, it seems that there could be incentives or people.
Look, you had when if they actually know people, I don't obviously support totalitarian governments, but if you actually know the people, you have less temptation to do these categorical, putting all the Japanese in concentration camps during the Second World War would not have seemed necessary if we could actually differentiate between all the various Japanese in America through our face recognition and other systems. So I think that this whole idea, there's a kind of privacy preoccupation that's actually destructive to, and anonymity is demonstrably unfortunate on the internet. Everywhere you have anonymous boards, they're just full of clutter and dreck.
That's a big gap in the crypto or blockchain community, isn't it? I mean,
yes, it is.
I mean, it's a civil war. In fact, I mean, it's
right.
not.
But the ones that prevail, the ones that can be actual money as a measuring stick, foundation for a new global economy and a new functional internet that doesn't get hacked billions of times a year. You have to have at the root in an actual demonstrable identity.
Well, let's go to a subject near and dear to some hearts here and there. In Life After Google, you predict that Bitcoin and gold might converge, and I didn't quite understand what you meant by that.
I don't. I've overestimated the ability of Bitcoin to adapt and to abandon its. Steve was right in his initial rejection of Bitcoin as a solution to the money problem. Bitcoin has got various functions, and it's been valuable, and historically it'll be known as the vessel of the first blockchain. But fixing on the number of units rather than on the price crippled it. It means it gets worse and worse as time passes. 18 million of the units have already been issued, and we got 100 years to issue 3 a million more or something. Is
that just a design flaw in Bitcoin?
Yes,
it can be easily remedied
it's a design
in some
flaw in Bitcoin, but it's a fundamental design flaw. If you have
fundamental to cryptocurrencies,
if you're going to have you're trying to create a measuring stick rather than some valuable commodity to exchange, and they're different. You don't want scarcity of money when you need lots of money. Scarcity in itself is not a virtue.
Yeah, Bitcoin made the monetarist mistake of thinking that if you restricted the supply, that would make it desirable and valuable. And what makes money desirable is that it's trustworthy. It keeps its value stable.
Right.
So you take the Swiss franc. If you look at the money supply of the Swiss franc and the size of the Swiss economy, you would conclude they're in a perpetual Venezuela-like hyperinflation. But the reason the money supply is so large is because for 100 years, Switzerland has managed its currency better than any other country in the world, and therefore people around the world want to hold Swiss francs because the store of value and everything else. So, but again, it's not the supply, it's trust. If people trust the money, the supply can be almost infinite because people want something they can use to do their transactions, investing, and everything else.
And if I could give just a short historical lesson here, which I think might inform us, one of the periods of the world that had a tremendous amount, probably a record economic growth, was during the gold standard. And the gold standard came about in England when Sir Isaac Newton became the director of the mint. And at the time, he was an alchemist, and he spent a lot of time trying to figure out whether or not you could recreate gold in a laboratory. And in the end, he decided you can't create it. So whatever is in the earth is a fixed amount. And so that gets to the scarcity issue. But where he got the value was then he went and estimated how much silver there was in the world, tried to recreate silver, found that you couldn't. And so therefore, if you could figure out a ratio between silver and gold, you would have a fixed value. And from that, he said it takes roughly, his estimate was, there was 16 times more silver than there was gold in the world. And so therefore, it took 1 pound, 16 ounces of sterling to equal 1 ounce of gold. All the other countries began saying, that makes sense. In the United States, we came up with the ratio of 1 ounce of gold equaled $20. The whole world eventually agreed on this measurement, and the focus of economic growth was growth in your was price stability, and therefore you could measure growth. Versus today, which is inflation at a 2% rate, which guarantees that you're losing value every single year.
Okay. So then, all you guys, what would your dream cryptocurrency look like? What? I mean, you kind of described that was part of your talk. So maybe you go last. I mean, George? What attributes would you want it to be like gold? Would you want it to be? And how do you get it to do that?
A digital gold. That's what Satoshi was trying to do. You've got to go back and do it right.
Is anybody doing that?
Well, I think lots of people are trying to do it, and it's a challenging problem. I think the basic insight is that money is time. It's not like time. Money is time. Money is a fungible representation of time in the economy. And time, of course, is the constraint on every economic decision made across an economy.
So how do you tie money to time?
We've got 𝗀𝗄𝗄𝗃 here, and Gail has been calculating time prices, and he shows what a powerful concept using time as the fundamental measure of value can be. The price of anything is the time a typical worker has to spend to make the money to buy it. And this is a measure that crosses the world economy, different historic periods. It's an absolutely unitary, unimpeachable measure. And I believe that all money succeeds to the extent that it captures what remains scarce when everything else grows abundant. And that is time. But time doesn't have a cap on it, though. It's it goes on into a presumably unlimited future.
What's the unit of account of digital gold, though? I mean, is it some sort of promise to get, if you hold this digital gold, is there a vault someplace where you can go and present that and get the gold?
Well, there are a variety of ideas. I'm sure you'll have many.
But I mean, the thing is, the problem with a certificate, sure, I mean, I like the real stuff, but if I've got some promise,
why do you like the real stuff?
Because a promise can always be broken, So I have a piece of paper or some item of information V that tells me I have a right to this gold. But if it's a promise from somebody, that's
well. You shouldn't focus on the gold as valuable in itself. Gold is valuable because it's a metric. It's a reliable measuring stick, and that's why the gold is valuable. And it doesn't matter whether an economy has any gold at all. As long as you tie to this price rather than to some quantity measure, you can have a currency that's acceptable around the world. As Steve pointed out about Switzerland or the numbers from the U.S.
But I mean, I follow exchange rates for Swiss franc. I mean, it's been rock solid. But I've invested in gold for about the last 8 years. If I gauged, what a basket of goods was by how gold has varied, it would have seen quite a bit of fluctuation. Based on how it's exchanged with the dollar. In a sense, you might say that these fiat currencies are artificially constraining the value of gold in the economy. True. But still, I mean, gold has not been that stable. And then,
that's stable in what?
Well, you look historically.
The way to look at gold is not perfect, but it does hold an intrinsic value for a variety of reasons better than anything else on Earth and has for 4,000 years. And when you see the price fluctuate, whether it's in dollars, euros, Swiss francs, Zimbabwe dollars, whatever, when that fluctuates, that's the value of the currency fluctuating in the present or people's anticipation for the future. Gold is the North Star. Everything floats around it. And when you fix it, when you make the currency stable by fixing it to gold, it no more restricts the size of an economy or the money supply any more than 12 inches in a foot restricts the size of a building you may wish to construct. Just one little factoid, and I helped produce, which George is in, a documentary called "In Money We Trust?" ? Amazingly, it got on public television. It's been on 300 stations, appeared 1,000 times, but you can find it in moneywetrust.org and moneywetrust.org. But one of the things we point out is that between, say, 1775 and 1900, when the gold supply in the world went up 3.5-fold, the money supply in the U.S., even though the dollar was tied to gold, went up 160-fold. So it just means it keeps a stable measurement. And one of the great follies, which we'll discuss tonight, of modern times is the idea that if you change the way you measure something, you change reality. And money is simply a measure of value. And when you try to manipulate it, you just gum things up like a virus in a computer, and we pay the price for it. Since we went off the gold standard in 1971, U.S. growth rates on average have fallen about 30% from what they were 180 years on the gold standard. Pretty damning.
Okay. Well, here's just a dumb question. I mean, supposing somebody, instead of having 20 million Bitcoins that had to be mined at great cost by all these people, somebody could magically get 20 million Bitcoins out there and say, that's it. There's not going to ever be another one. As long, and all of it, would that work?
That's what they're doing. That's essentially what Bitcoin's doing, and that's the mistake. But they're not going to
take them a while. Why is it a mistake?
It was a mistake because it rendered.
How do you know how much money you need for an economy. When money is like a claim check, it's the activity of the economy that determines the amount of money.
No, I was saying use that as the gold. As those 20 million things are 20 million ounces of gold, if you like.
No, gold is unlimited. It's not. There's no limit to the amount of gold.
He doesn't think so.
No,
There's no limit. We've mined slag heaps. We mine the oceans. We talk about mining meteors. Elon Musk wants to mine the moon. There's no limit to the amount of materials available.
And that's in no way negative to the value of gold?
No, but for 4,000 years, it's increased on average. First, you can't destroy it. That's a good thing, so you don't get supply shocks. It increases on average of about 1.5%, 2% a year. Sometimes like the California gold rush, which in many ways was bigger than the Spanish looting of Latin America, went up 5 or 6% for a couple of years and then went back down to the average. So not perfect, but better than anything else. So in mining technologies, the way the geology works, maybe there's a God out there, but the way the geology works is even when you get advances, it still becomes more difficult to go deeper in the earth to mine a gold. And if you ever want to see what hell would be like, go in a South African or gold mine, hundreds of feet below the surface of the earth. It is unbelievable. And so, for a variety of reasons, it's the best we have.
And that's because it represents time, is my thesis.
All right, well, we're going to go to the floor to tie this up a little bit. We have a question that says, seems like currency and identity are tied by default. Will there continue to be a monopoly in identity? That, I think, goes to your thing earlier, George, about anonymity. I assume that means a government monopoly on identity?
I guess so. I don't really understand the question. Maybe the question makes sense to you.
How do you reconcile time value in Nigeria versus time value in the U.S.? Let's do that instead. More fun.
Gail can do that. Time in Nigeria, it takes a lot more time to earn the money to purchase food for your table to sustain your life. However, the progress of technology has been equalizing because as time prices drop, the Nigerian gains more time to go on the internet and try to hustle your grandmother about...
Is that a bug or a feature, George?
An hour of additional time for somebody in Nigeria not growing food or subsistence life. Gail does a comparison to a guy in India growing rice and wheat in the United States for bread, and we spend almost no time earning money to buy bread, while the Asians have had to spend a good portion of their total lives growing rice, and they have now gained as much as 7 hours a day to do other things and to steal intellectual property from the U.S., according to, and copy it. Now, my experience in Asia tells me that they're ahead of us, so I guess we're going to have to start.
We may have more time on our hands here, George. Okay, wait, we've got a cyberpunk out there. Wouldn't getting rid of anonymity be a tyrant's dystopian dream? You can watch, in other words, they can watch everything you do because they know exactly that it's you.
People imagining that tyrants want to watch everything you do is really delusional. It's vanity. It's the vanity of the millennials that that governments are avidly interested in all the details of their lives. More important is that they have command themselves of their own personal data and which they only want in order to disclose and in order to claim rights as citizenship in the society.
Well, that's a great question we didn't get into earlier with the whole advertising thing. Is ownership of your own data? Basically right now, media companies they're borrowing the data about things that you do and other places you've been and what you've read and renting that to marketers who want to use it to try to sell you stuff. Okay, that's the basic model. Now, there's lots and lots of talk that, for instance, blockchain could be used to somehow enable me to be the person that owns that information rather than Steve and Forbes kind of trying to sneak a peek at it. And if they want to do that, I go, yeah, Steve, you can have it, but you got to pay me $1. Do you put much stock in those kinds of things?
You overvalue yourself. No, just kidding.
Do you put much stock in that, George?
I think that people will choose how much data of their own metadata that they want to control. And using the new the old cryptographic methods and the new sophisticated forms, they're going to be able to keep their data as they want and dispense it.
And what about the famous anonymous browsing? I mean, the other thing Forbes has to, among their many things you have to deal with, is people with ad blockers that don't say who I am when I'm peering at a Forbes story. That's not great for Forbes.
Well, what we've done, yes, you can block the ads we have on Forbes.com, but you don't get as much access as if you agree to share the data. You have access as much as you want. So it's voluntary. Okay. You want to block the ads, you get less of our content. You don't want to block them, you get more of them. Your choice.
I'd rather pay. And that's what...
Don't let me stop you. I'll take your check now. Or Bitcoin.
I do pay.
Okay, one more of these since everyone sees. Ed, do you agree with George that gold supply is unlimited and that Bitcoin cannot accommodate economic growth? Oh, I'm sorry, this is Ed. This is for Ed.
Yep. So, in a way, I believe that gold supply is unlimited because you're just using the pricing mechanism to, right? But physically, I do believe that the gold supply in the world is limited to what is here. And that may vary, increase a little bit over time, but
until the alchemists get going.
Yes, that's right. And when you talk about mining gold today, most of the gold that's mined is not a huge vein that they find that they're getting this gold ore and purifying it quickly. This is called placer gold, which is basically gold dust where you have to crush a ton of rock in order to get 1 gram of gold. Now, do the math to get to an ounce, and you realize that the cost all in is about $1,200 an ounce.
Is that why you invest in Bitcoin companies rather than gold mining companies?
Yeah. I don't trust mining companies because I have to depend on management. I'd rather just buy the gold after it's been refined.
Some years back, I did an infographic on all the world's gold, and it turns out that I think it's about 1,500, 2,000 metric tons that are being mined a year. And turns out, I think, in the entire history of the last 2,000 years, it's about 3.5 Olympic-sized swimming pools of gold. So if you go with about 7 billion people, it's about 5 gold rings per hand. So to me, it does seem that it's limited, okay, if you're just looking at the material. Now, if you think of money as a system of credit where you can promise gold, then I guess it's unlimited. But if we're just talking, this substance, this element.
It's a measuring stick.
Well, what makes it special as opposed to platinum or silver? I'm just not getting it.
Well, because jewelry. Money is not valuable because it's really jewelry. Jewelry is valuable because it's really money, based on time.
I guess. I'm just stuck in my little world.
No, I mean, but let's look again. I want to try to stay on the question of how we get from the dystopian, if you like, world we're in now to the glorious future. I mean, do these things contend? Do you have like multiple currencies and people start deciding, well, I'm going to put my money in this one rather than that one, and guys selling things saying, let's denominate it in this or that?
People like simplicity and things that work. And one reason why the gold standard came in the 1800s, the 1800s was the most wealth-producing century in human history. We produced more wealth that 110, 120-year period to World War I than the previous 4,000 years put together. And the system rose. It started in, the Dutch started it, but it really came with Britain. We imitated it, and because it worked, other countries went on the gold standard. They had different variations of it, but the world, in effect, was tied not by a conference, but because the thing worked. And so you had free flows of capital, free flows of people, free flows of trade, somewhat, and the world prospered. And so in terms of currencies, people are going to pick one that works. And they default to the dollar. It's default, not because just the best in a bad bunch. But if they have something that's trustworthy, like the Libra, and I don't know why, as I wrote in an open letter to Mark Zuckerberg, I don't know why he used the word Libra, which came out of the Roman Empire, and we all know what happened to the Roman Empire. And so I thought he should dispense with the humility and call it the mark. You know, Germany gave up the mark. And do it that way, because people will use something that, like the Swiss franc, that they can trust and focus on producing products and services rather than try to figure out how do I preserve what I have. And you can trust the prices. As we all know, economies can't function without prices. Allows us to do billions of transactions a day. But if you can't trust the information the price gives you, then you get the kind of chaos and social distrust that we have today.
Do you think something like Libra is actually a threat to the U.S. dollar?
Oh, if they do it right, absolutely. Absolutely. And the Europeans, shows how dumb I shouldn't say that. If they had done the euro right, if they had understood money and made the euro as good as gold, it would have replaced the dollar. That's why Bob Mundell helped create the euro. He thought, by golly, if you have two major currencies competing with each other, you'd get a good currency. You had no conception they'd be both racing to the bottom rather than trying to compete with the best one.
The Chinese almost did it. Zhou Chuan tried to do it in China.
And then they went off the rails.
Yeah, so I have a slight contrarian view to that point, and that is Libra. The problem with Libra is trust in Facebook. So we don't trust them with our own personal information, and now they're going to create a cryptocurrency. We're going to trust them with all our financial information.
Well, that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why they're putting it in Switzerland. And it's not going to be managed in the United States. And the thing is on Libra, it's not going to be you trust Facebook. It's just if the system seems to work and is trustworthy as using as a transaction. I want to buy something from George, his latest book. I can use 20 Libras or 20 marks. And I don't care if Facebook knows that I bought his book or not. They probably would know it anyway. But the key thing is, if it works like with Newton and the British pound, people came to trust it. That by golly, one way or the other, they would keep it stable. If they broke the trust, as Britain did in 1931, then people go elsewhere.
So I see the future more in Amazon coin once they develop that, because there's already commerce happening on the Amazon
Amazon's
site.
got a great opportunity. Starbucks could have done it with their own cards. And by the way, the idea that this is something radically new. Companies invent money all the time. They're called loyalty programs, frequent miles. And by golly, the airlines treat frequent miles the way governments treat currency, sadly. But it's a form of currency. You get these catalogs, all the stuff you can buy with the American Express points.
So in other words, I mean, so is trust? I mean, you have to get the technology right, because if the technology sucks, people aren't going to use it. They aren't going to trust it.
Exactly.
And so then you've got really three problems here. You've got a technical problem. You've got what I'll call a marketing problem, which is to get people to believe it. And then you've got to get around the existing powers that be that are trying to stomp you, whether it's government or Visa or PayPal or whoever happens to not like what you're doing. That's a tough, how do you sprout in a garden as intimidating as that? You got a lot of problems.
But they're being overcome. They are. And they will be. We're going to have a whole series of new generations of cryptocurrencies that are increasingly sophisticated and better, more scalable, more tied to real identities, overcoming the anonymity trap, and
so in other words, let 1,000
and not capped.
So let 1,000 cryptocurrencies bloom and may the best coin win.
That's right. Yep. And overcome von Mises' great error here. Here's the question.
Okay.
See, gold is treating as a commodity, and the marginal revolution in economics is based on the subjective theory of value. But the value has to be translated into some fungible unit linked, like all other values, to time. And once you do that, then you have a unit by which you can express your subjective judgment of the value of all the goods and services in the world that you might want to purchase.
Okay. There's some suspicion about the anonymity of the messages that we're getting here. And so I have been instructed to say that we have a microphone right there.
Yeah, I would like to, I think the flaw of this, I think this anonymity thing is a flaw of this thought exchange program.
So we have a microphone right here that your real world person can get up to and harangue us or ask questions or whatever you like. And you can use an avatar or whatever. It's all good. Who are you?
Giuseppe Gori.
Giuseppe Gori.
Is it on? Yes? You are.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to clarify a little bit about anonymity and traceability. The two of them go together. So the information on the blockchain can be encrypted or can be not encrypted, depending on what you want. So when we are talking about anonymity of information, you're talking really about encryption or non-encryption of information on the blockchain. When we are talking about anonymity in public networks such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, the trend is towards anonymity of the address, just like the IP address. So the address, who this final destination of the transaction of the money, where the money flows, who owns this address tends to be anonymous. And that's what George and myself agree that it shouldn't be anonymous. There should be an identification that is associated to a person through biometrics and to a device through other means, so that that particular destination of the transaction, if that person does something wrong, for example, steals money from you, we want to know who that person is. So just like in society, we want to have a certain amount of government intervention, minimum, but we want that intervention when somebody does something illegal, and we all agree that there are illegal things that are being done and need to be pursued. So in the same way, in the internet, in the blockchain, we want those addresses with a mandate from a judge or whatever needs to be done, if that person is suspected of a crime, to be able to find out who that person is. So the current networks like Bitcoin and Ethereum are running with anonymity, and I think I disagree. We should go towards unique identification. And
is that traceability? Is that the same as?
It is the same as traceability. In those cases that are proven that you suspect somebody of a crime, just like in society. So, so that's once you give or you create this system with unique identification, then you can build all sorts of other things to defend yourself from attacks and for security, for all sorts of other reasons, for scalability of applications. We'll probably talk tomorrow about what the blockchain can be used for, apart from we talked about currency. Currency is just a minimum part of what the one small application of the blockchain.
Okay.
So lots of things to talk about.
Yeah, you have tomorrow too, so let's let these guys. Okay.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you, Giuseppe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Stevens, and I am confused. So I hope you can clear my mind, because to me there are multiple elements to whatever we call currency. Privacy, I absolutely want privacy when I'm in my cave. I don't want anybody to identify me. But when I develop something, in my case satellite technology, and I go to sell it to the world, I want absolute proof of my individual identity and ownership of what I create as property. So I need both functions, privacy and identification of property. But then there seems to be multiple uses for this. For George, this is a unit of measure. And we can take it and we can identify it, take the small amounts as a penny or into multiple astronomical units. So we can measure everything and do it globally. Then we have the medium of exchange, that this can be used to transfer between people. And that we have our gold is a problem because it's too heavy and not really transportable. The third part is a storage of surplus. I stick this in my pocket, hopefully in gold, it's outside the system. This is dependent on the Canadian banks. Help me. And two things that I'm missing
Especially
right now.
after the election.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. The two things that I'm looking to understand more is the time price function of money and how that will come in the future and how it will adjust, whether we're talking about the time to produce value or store value or exchange value or have a storage of value. And the other one is the extension of credit and how we do it, whether it's the bills of lading or how do we extend credit with our currency. So I'm seeing like 6 issues that I'm trying to get as money. Please
that's an excellent statement, and we will be addressing all those subjects in subsequent panels.
Yeah, does anybody want to give a quick answer to?
I mean, there are a whole.
Time price. How is time price going to be monetized? Or is it inverted? How do I store time?
Oh, okay. You store it as money. You see, that's why you need money, because time in itself is not storable. It's equally distributed to us all. It's available. It's unlimited. It's got a lot of characteristics that are very valuable, but you still need to transmute it into a fungible form that can be used in transactions and can be stored and perform the functions that.
Okay.
So in any case, let me point out that there is a massive difference between being anonymous and being responsible. I am really a big fan of being responsible for your actions, but I'm a really big opponent of of losing all of my anonymity because I might trip up, largely because I do not believe that justice in the United States or anywhere else in the world is meted out in a fair way across the population. No, the government doesn't care if I bought Subway or McDonald's. But if I'm in their crosshairs, they care about every little darn thing I ever did. And so for a lot of reasons, I just can't get my head around the idea that we're not going to be anonymous.
Well, when you actually eliminate that anonymity goal, you have systems that don't require you to disclose any personal data to do a transaction. If it's the reason we have this constant flow across the world of personal data for every successive transaction is because there's no stable, dependable identities.
Well, right, and that's, of course, one of the reasons why we
so you'll get more anonymity with a system with secure, fixed identities than you do with with the sort of murky pursuit of anonymity that the current internet expresses.
Well, yes, and the one last point, we hear great stories about all the people that Bitcoin puts in jail. If the current banking and financial system was anywhere near as productive at catching criminals, we'd be putting tens of millions of white-collar crime people in jail, and we are not. So
We'd be putting the banks in jail.
Well, there's the banks, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The governments that nationalize the banks are really the culprits here.
Okay.
George, I just wanted to know if any...
Sorry, who are you?
Yeah, my name is David Kruger. I just want to know if you could address the specific technical issue of zero-knowledge proofs, because it seems like it solves both the being able to conduct your business privately and the need for verifiable identities. And I'm not sure folks are aware of what a zero-knowledge proofs are.
Could you, what for the benefit of
zero-knowledge proofs are the kind of functions that can be used in an internet that is rooted in fixed identities, but allows you to function across the internet without divulging a lot of personal data. That's what it overcomes that problem. And
a zero-knowledge proofs allows you to be able to do business with any merchant. It's a blockchain-based technology that allows you to do business with any merchant without divulging your identity to the merchant, but still able to do a traceable transaction.
Yeah.
So the question is not who you do. It gives you the discretion over who you disclose your transactional information to. You gain control of it with a zero-knowledge proof.
There's a sense almost, I mean, I know that zero-knowledge proofs, I mean, there's a whole mathematics of it, but there's a sense in which public key cryptography, when you sign something, you are proving that you know the private key, but you've not divulged anything about it. So in a sense, that's a zero-knowledge proof. I mean, it's not.
But the real power in the technology is when you combine both. When you're able to do both a blockchain-based verifiable identity and you're able to do a zero-knowledge proof. So they're not exclusive; they're complementary, or at least that's my view.
Yeah, I just don't know if you need the full zero-knowledge proofs, but maybe you do. I need to see the specifics of a proposal.
He has a great system that David. Thank you, Dave.
Hi, Cyrus is on. Cyrus Crone started Slate magazine in 1995, and Bill Gates wanted to prove the economics of print publishing were flawed. Yeah. So we opened Pandora's box a little bit there. I wanted to shift topics quickly, which is, as a former presidential candidate.
Keep your distance from me, please.
Blockchain has now been tested for voting in 3 cities: Salt Lake City, West Virginia, and Denver, Colorado. How do you feel about blockchain being used to allow individuals to vote from their phones to evolve democracy, or maybe devolve it?
I'll believe it when they can use it in Chicago. West Virginia's a good start.
Well, that's again, back to my same old question, how do we get from a world where this stuff is regarded as suspicious, to say the least, to one where they would actually use it for something as serious? I mean, is it going to take us 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, George, in your vision?
Well, look what I like to look at what Ethereum accomplished. We had an IPO crisis in the United States, a 90% drop in IPOs. There was startups really had no path to the public markets, and you had this unicorn phenomenon, and Ethereum created one.
Just so everybody knows, Ethereum is a company, New York-based company that does blockchain technology.
Zug, Switzerland-based company that started by Vitalik Buterin, who was one of the early Thiel Fellows. He was one of the first Thiel Fellows, and he broke all the rules of venture capital by launching a new blockchain, a new currency, Ether, a new form of of smart contracts with a new programming language called Solidity to implement the smart contracts, and a new token concept called ERC-20, which sustained $20 billion of new ICOs in 1 year, and really brought a huge flow of funds to entrepreneurial activities and startups. A lot of them were junk, as a lot of the dot-coms were junk, but it really has unleashed this massive movement that we currently find all around the world. And so this is the capability. This can happen very fast when somebody gets it right. Failed and misconceived cryptocurrencies will languish. And I think, however, we're in a situation where there are going to be a lot of upside surprises, many of which I've get told about every couple days these days.
How about the whole distributed computing thing, which is kind of basic? I mean, the history hasn't been great. Skype, started out as a P2P thing, and they had to drop it. I remember doing a Wired story about Juiced, if you remember, that was funded by the founders of Skype, that was going to be P2P video. It was going to get around the TV net, was going to destroy the TV networks with P2P video. And a lot of it fell apart for, was it just they were too early?
BitTorrent did it.
Yeah, and Tor is still there. I mean, that's still there. But were all these things just too early? Is that what you were saying? Is that what you're saying, in effect?
Well, they had to do it right. BitTorrent did it right and is still out there, and it constitutes a significant portion of internet traffic. It's
but you don't think that, I mean, back to the security question that we sort of started with, that having 7 billion nodes in your network isn't inherently less safe than having fewer?
No.
No.
It depends what your architecture is, whether it's one that scales or whether it becomes exponentially more hackable as it grows.
So you think all these big icons, I mean, Amazon here and Google and Facebook, these massive, these are Titanics sailing around, about to hit the iceberg of blockchain?
No, I think Amazon's probably the best company in the world at the moment. Maybe not. It's one of the best. And so there Google, it performs fabulous feats on the existing internet. But I think they are not monopolies. They should not be prosecuted by the feds or have lots of special requirements imposed on them. I don't think Google should be sued for sex discrimination by the Trump administration, which is currently happening.
But I mean, even though they're standing in the way of the progress that you want to see, you wouldn't be happy to see Uncle Sam give them a few kicks?
I certainly wouldn't. I think there's real danger that we're going to destroy our high-tech economy, and we'll find ourselves far behind China in 5 years. Not just slightly behind China, but far behind China if we continue to misunderstand and abuse our high-tech companies.
Well, can we afford a revolution in that kind of situation, or do we want to ride the horses we have?
What?
Do we want to, in other words, I mean, if we really are in a 5-year war that we may lose, I mean, we're not going to make this transition in 5 years.
We're going to discuss China later, but I think we have to learn how to live in a world with China as probably the greatest power. There's no way we can get around that I believe. I think we have to recognize that fact. And just as the British understood after the Second World War that they no longer could have their empire and have the dominant reserve currency and sought a special relationship with the United States, which was the ascendant power, we have to come to terms with China's 20-fold rise in GDP and capability, and it's millions more engineers than we have. It's less. It's fanatically hardworking population, inhibited by communism, but the communists now have a smaller government than we do as a share of GDP, and they have 3 times more IPOs, many more business starts, all sorts of incredible technology companies that I've visited. And I just think that the idea that China can be best treated as a threat is just a mistake. It's a grave policy error.
I guess I'd like to just weigh in against Google, and this is speaking as a businessman, so I've got educational websites, and I would not go after them for antitrust, but I would go after them for stealing or misappropriating information, so on the websites. So for instance, I mean, you'll see snippets or carousels. Basically what they'll do is they'll take information from these sites and represent it in a way that makes it unnecessary for users to actually come to my site. So in a sense, I'm not necessarily then getting the business I would, as opposed to just if they just listed the information. Or if I'm looking up images, for instance, often I do not need to actually go to the site. I see everything I want to see on the images. So they've taken those images off sites, and I don't need to actually visit the sites to go there. So, you know, in a sense, they've grabbed all the information there. So from my vantage as a businessman, I mean, the thing is, I'm putting it in the worst possible light, because there's also a sense in which I wouldn't be in business with these websites if I didn't have Google driving organic traffic to these sites. So it's, you know, it's a mixed sort of thing. But I'll just share one thing with you, which I really resent about Google. So I've got these educational sites. So there's one was doing great. Google changes its algorithm. I think it was a Penguin update or so, and I lose about 60% of my traffic, 60% of my profitability. Nothing like that is going to happen if you've got a brick and mortar business. You got an internet business, though.
Would having a blockchain business have made it any better?
I'm not sure it would have made any, but we're just beating on Google right now, right? So it's, you know, so I see a 60% drop because they've changed the algorithm in terms of then what pages of mine will rise up in the search engine's result pages. And the best analogy that I have for it is if you build a Walmart, you know, you're going to put it by a major highway, and it's there, and you're going to be getting that traffic. The economy may sag, but you're still going to be seeing a lot of traffic. Google, by changing its algorithm, can basically push a button, and that highway, which is going by my Walmart, now becomes a dirt road, and nobody's going there. So that's what they can do, and to me, that is just inordinate power to control the economics of small businessmen like me.
I submit that comparable events happen in the real world. Roads get closed.
Not nearly as radical as what you see with Google.
We got 3 people and 9 minutes, okay? So you're going to have to do really quick questions and quickish answers.
Well, I came up, actually, my lesser question is I know that I was reading that you are developing your own cryptocurrency, right, Mr. Gilder?
No.
Dr. Gilder, you're not?
No.
Really? Oh, okay, I misunderstood that. Well, more importantly, I don't think the yahoos in Washington can or should be controlling Google at all, or any tech. I think that's a joke, that politicians can control tech, please. However, when you have a company as huge and ubiquitous and powerful as Google, and they can put their finger on the pulse, the huge elephant in the room to me is politics. And when they can put their finger on the pulse of search engine results and ephemeral messaging, they have 3 million pages of data on every single Google user, 3 million pages, And once politics, and they put their hand on that scale, then it can be over. And you're talking about donations in kind, which is election fraud. So I'd like you to address that, because that's a huge, to me, the biggest concern of all. The main reason I came here.
Well,
today.
wait till they do it. I think there's a real paranoia out there, or else vainglory that imagines that Google is changing intervening in their search engines constantly to manipulate politics or to suppress conservative views or whatever, or liberal views or whatever it might be. I just think that it's as soon as you make the terrible mistake that Washington's in the process of making, of rendering the owners of conduits responsible for the content that they carry, you're going to sow paranoia everywhere. Everybody's always going to believe. As soon as it became known that Facebook was hiring tens of thousands of kids to decide what fake news was, it was all over. You can't really have a social network if you create this kind of model.
No, yeah, but no, we have to stop that. Next, thanks. We got two more to do.
Yeah, my name is Alexander Filatov of Tonlabs.
I'll talk later.
Tonlabs, the company that is building infrastructure for the 5th generation blockchain platform. Looking at the theme of this panel, whether blockchain can actually enable a renaissance of the internet, my question is, given that there
This is Ton that you are, the Telegram online network. It's one of the big second generation blockchains that's emerging now.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate that. So the question is, given that there are new generation blockchain platforms coming up, decentralized and fast at the same time, how transformative that can be to the industries, and to what industries? It fintech, logistics, some of the other stuff, and maybe that's actually the solution, to look at the blockchain as a back-end decentralized infrastructure rather than, new money to replace something. Because I think we spend so much more time on the currencies. So the question is transformation and blockchain as a back-end infrastructure.
Yeah. I think that the reason blockchain is so powerful and so likely to prevail is that it addresses a whole array of critical problems that we've face across the economy and opens a whole set of new business opportunities. So I completely agree with that.
So it should be seen as infrastructure rather than as a
yeah,
thing in of
it
itself.
starts as a new infrastructure for communications, a new internet based on public keys and private keys rather than on IP addresses that particular nations imagine they control and which have no security properties.
Okay, we're getting the evil eye, so one last.
I would make the assertion, George, that the fundamental technology that's missing, that's underpinning so much of this conversation, is the ability for people to be able to control the use and distribution of their data everywhere all the time, and that we're not going to make as much forward progress as we would like unless we solve that problem.
And that's a technical problem, not something that has to be legislated by, and I agree with your view.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, audience. 90 minutes. That's, I think, the longest panel I've ever done. We're not in Russia.